everybody. Welcome to my sewing room. My name is Sue. I live in Southeast Pennsylvania, and today we're going to talk about hand quilting. I've had a lot of comments from people on YouTube about their interest in hand quilting and all of the products that I use with it. So today I'm going to give you a little demonstration, and I'm going to show you all the tools that I use, and I'll talk about what I like and some of what I don't like. Okay, so let's start off with the quilt that I'm currently working on, and I'll just give you a general overview of how I do my hand quilting. I'm doing a crosshatch quilting pattern on this. You can probably see it down here. It forms little squares across the whole grid of the top. So for hand quilting, I always wear a thimble, and I can quilt like this coming towards me, or if I put it on my thumb, then I can quilt going away from me. So right now they're coming towards me, so I wear it on my pointer finger. And this thimble has a lip around the very top of it that keeps your needle from slipping out. It really holds it in place. There's a little grid on the top too that helps grab your needle, because there are times when you're hand quilting that you really do need to push hard through the fabric. So I'll show you the basic quilting stitch. This is where my thread is coming up here. So I'm going to just advance my needle just a little bit past it to form the first stitch next. And I bend it back and I bring it through the surface, and then I bring it forward to go down and back to come up, and then forward to go down. And if you can see underneath, my fingers are underneath here because this helps me control like how deeply the needle goes in. If I didn't have my fingers in there, that needle would sink down in so much further. So my fingers underneath kind of act to stop it. See, it's not going in any further because I have my finger right there. And it also helps because you need a little bit of tension on this to help keep your stitches even. So it's a rocking stitch. You're just going back and forth. And that's it. It's basically a running stitch. And you just have to do that a few more million times and your quilt is done. I'm sure I've taken millions of stitches in my life. But honestly, the really thing I have to say about this is that there's so much about this that can't be taught. You have to actually jump in and do it yourself and give it a try, because it's about feel. Starting with your fabrics, how do they feel? There are all these fabrics that, I'm a scrap quilter, so these fabrics are not all the same here. And the only way I can really describe it is if you get a needle and you start hand quilting and you go through them. You can really feel the difference in fabrics when you hand quilt. The other thing that's by feel is the type of batting that you use. There are battings that are so much easier to quilt through, and then depending what you put on your backing, it depends on the thimble that you use. And that's the thing I can't teach anybody, is you just kind of have to jump in and give it a try and see what works for you. Having said that, I will tell you what I do. Now right here too, I don't know how well you can see this. This is, see how my seams go towards this light blue? They're pressed to this side. And here they're pressed to this side also. So right here in this corner, there is bulk there. And if you're machine quilting, I don't know, I really can't speak to that. I don't know how much of an issue that is. But when you're hand quilting, that's another thing. I can really feel that that's more difficult to go through. So sometimes if I don't get the right length of the stitch that I want there, sometimes it's very difficult to go through that many layers right there in those corners. Sometimes I will take a little tiny back stitch there and then go forward again. Because I know on the back, doing a back stitch will show. But being a quilter myself, I have never noticed that on the back of my quilts, and non-quilters will never see that. But people do look at your stitching on the front of your quilt. So I would rather have my stitches consistent on the top. And really, it's such a small stitch there, but I do feel that it helps hold things together right there. And it helps keep these seams now more secure there. And it doesn't happen at every intersection, but every once in a while, you know, you run into a little bit of bulk. And this quilt really isn't so bad, but, you know, if you have quilts that have, say, like a lot of triangles in, and, you know, like a pinwheel quilt where everything comes together right in the center there, there's a lot more bulk there. So sometimes, and you don't have to do this all the time, it kind of depends how your needle is rocking and where it comes up at. But sometimes I will go back and put that little tiny back stitch in just so my stitches look more consistent than going forward. I just don't want a large gap showing in there where my needle just couldn't come through that bulk. So I'm just going down, come up, go down, come up. And again, my fingers are underneath here. And I will show you my fingers underneath. Here is what they look like, because my needle does poke into my finger all the time. And sometimes I have to, here's my thumb. The thumb isn't as bad, but the forefinger can get pretty nasty sometimes. So sometimes I do have to take a break from quilting and give it about 3 good days to heal up a little bit. But I saw somebody online ask about that one time, and they called it the receiving finger. They said, what do you do about the receiving finger? And I knew right away what they meant, being a hand quilter. That's the finger that's underneath and kind of receiving the brunt of the tip of your needle. And I've tried putting like tape on there. I've tried wearing like a different, more like a silicone kind of thimble. I've tried even cutting off the tip of like a latex glove. I've tried like many things, and I can't find anything at all that works for me, because I have to be able to feel it. I just have to feel it. And maybe other people do use something else that works for them, but again, I can only show you what is working for me. And I've gotten used to it. I don't even really think about it anymore, but it does look pretty bad. So that's it in a nutshell. It isn't a hard stitch to do. The hardest thing to do, I think, is to try and keep your stitches regular. And, you know, my stitches are not going to win any prizes anywhere. They're just not. But having said that, too, I've been doing this for so long that I have a rhythm. I can just like grab a needle and just pick it up and just go. And even though my stitches may not be like perfect, like machine stitches, they're not. But I feel like they are me. They are my signature. It is like my fingerprint in all of my quilts. They are very personal, and for me, they're pretty consistent. Every once in a while, like I said, if you run into a big seam or a fabric that's really giving you trouble, they might be off a little bit. But keep in mind too that once the quilt is washed, these stitches do kind of sink in a little bit more, and they aren't as visible. And if they're a little bit wonky, I always think, well, maybe 100 years from now, when some quilt historian looks at something I've done, maybe it'll give them a chuckle. So it's not a hard stitch to do. So if you've never done it before, I encourage you you know, to jump in and give it a try. And start with something smaller because you're going to have a really good feeling, you know, when you finish your project. So start with something small and something that you know that you're going to be able to finish. And don't stress out too much about it. So just have fun with it. Okay, so I'll share with you all of the supplies that I use when I do my hand quilting, and we'll start with some of the most basic things. I keep by my side all the time, I have a little sewing caddy, and this is June Taylor. I don't know if you can get these anymore. This is decades old, and it served me really well. It has a little place for my thimble. It has a little place over here for my scissors. And then there's a little place here, I think, for like your marking tools. You know, like if you had a marking pencil there. And then on the side is a magnet. So once I use my needles, I put them here, and then I will rethread all of these needles all at once. I only have a few left on here right now, but I put all of my needles on here all at once. So that's my little sewing caddy. And the thimble that I use here is a Dritz thimble, and it's called a non-slip thimble. The outside has all of these little grooves on it so that your needle doesn't slip off. I don't know if you can hear those grooves. And then the top has a lip on it with a grid on the inside of it that also prevents your needle from slipping. And sometimes I really do have to push on my thimble quite hard to get through some places that have bulk. And this is the only thimble I think I've ever used from the very beginning. And so this is what feels very comfortable for me. This one that I use is a size 10 or 17 millimeters. I did write things down in case you want a list of everything that I use, then I'll share that later on. So I know there are so many thimbles out there, and if you've never hand quilted before, I can't highly recommend this. They were great in the beginning, but like everything else, over the years, the quality of them has really fallen, and they just are not made as well anymore. But it's all I know, and I can't really use another thimble just because I've just used this one for so long. Okay, so that's my Dritz thimble. And then the needles that I use are rock sand needles, and this is what they look like. And I use a size 10 betweens, and they come in this cute little tube that always has a little seashell on the top. The seashell is different on all of them, and it's a real seashell too. So they're cute. And then this has 50 needles in it. I could actually go smaller than that, except for the fact that I can't then thread the needles. I can't get the, I really can't get the thread through the eye of the needle once they get smaller. So this is the one I've settled on, and it works fine for me. Again, if you're new to quilting, I would suggest you start with a needle that's a little bit larger, which is like maybe a size 7 or 8. You're going to have an easier time with that. And once you get comfortable with your stitches, then you'll want to go to a smaller needle. Okay, so those are my rock sand needles. And then the thread I use for now is Coats and Clark, and it says hand quilting on the label here. Coats and Clark hand quilting. This is what I use predominantly. I don't see the weight of the thread on here anywhere, but just make sure that it says for hand quilting. Hand quilting thread is a little bit stronger, It does have a polyester core to it, and it's wrapped with cotton, and it is pretty strong. So I've used other threads, quilting threads, and I haven't had a problem with any of them. I can feel a difference. There's definitely a difference. I just don't have a strong preference as far as threads go. I just haven't seen anything that was like a wow factor for me, that made one thread spectacular, over the others. So this is what I'm using right now, Coats and Clark, nothing fancy. Um, and then, when I do pull my needles off, to use in the quilt, I'll tie my knot, and then I use a thread conditioner on it. And I started off by using this Thread Heaven that comes in a little blue box, and it's a piece of silicone. And I just will run my thread through it like that, and it keeps your thread from kinking up or spiraling, and it also helps me with how it glides through the fabric. Again, this is a personal preference. It's not necessary if you have never done this before. This isn't something that you absolutely need, but I find it helps me. And I know other people use beeswax too, and it's the same basic principle where you're preventing your threads from tangling or knotting while you're quilting. Now, Thread Heaven too, they got sold and somebody bought them, and they're selling their product now for 3 times the amount of money, so I didn't like that. So I kind of went online and I found somebody who recommended something that's pretty comparable, but a lot less expensive. And so now I buy these. Let's see if I can open this one. I buy these. These are earplugs, and I think they're primarily for swimmers. But this is silicone, and it's not exactly the same as Thread Heaven, but it works exactly the same. And I just get these at Walmart. The brand name is Max, M-A-C-K-S. And then Walmart sells their own generic brand also, and they're fine. So now I just buy them like this, and one of these dots in here is about the same as one of these, and it's so much more affordable. So if you want to try it, I would recommend getting this first at a local Walmart instead of buying the Thread Heaven. Okay, so that's what I use to actually do the quilting. And I've been asked questions too about how do I mark my quilts. And I'll show you what I have with me right now. There's many ways that you can do it. So if you see something here that's not working for you, I really, suggest you go look at a lot of different videos, because you will find something that works for you. First of all, I try not to mark a lot of my quilts anymore. I guess I'm lazy. I don't know. Marking is not my favorite thing, but I mean, I'm not afraid to mark. I'll do it. It's okay. I don't hate it. I just want to get to the quilting right away. So a lot of times I'll stick with a pattern that I don't have to mark, like my crosshatch. Okay, so having said that, if I do have to mark a quilt, these are my preferred markers. They are called Leonis, and it's the blue marking pen, and I have had a 100% success rate with these washing out. I've never had any issue whatsoever with these. They always come out. So far, knock on wood, never an issue. Now the ones that have blue writing on, let's see if I can get one out here. ones that have blue writing on are the ones I use to mark my quilts. These are water soluble. This blue line will stay on the quilt top until it goes in the washing machine. So that's a reason I use this one the most. But sometimes I just need something temporary, and it's the same company, but now this has pink writing on it, and it tells you right on there that this is air erasable. And what that means is if you draw something on your quilt top or on fabric, if you give it a day or sometimes even just a couple of hours and you come back and that line is gone, it's just, you know, the air has erased it. So these are just temporary, the pink ones. But like I said, sometimes if I am hand quilting and my point from A to B is a little bit longer than what I'd like, I might just get one of these out and get a little ruler and just draw a quick little line, just so I have something to guide me to get to that next point in my quilting. So this company makes two different kinds, the water erasable and the air erasable. So if you buy these, be very careful, because if you want to see your lines until you are done quilting them, get the blue ones. If you just want something very temporary that will go away, use the pink ones. So those are my marking pens. There are also chalk pen or chalk pencils, which I have not ever had a lot of success with, mainly because every time I try to sharpen them, the tip breaks and it just doesn't give me good lines. I've tried and tried and tried, and I've tried several different brands, and because it's chalk, so it's very, very soft, and I just cannot get a good tip that lasts for me. I still have a few, and I will use them sporadically, like you know, like if I use my blue pens and I'm trying to mark blue fabric, I'm not going to see that line. So I might get a chalk pencil out then and draw in my line over the blue or something dark, because these blue pens won't show up on every fabric. So, but be careful. I think the white chalk, again, I just think, shouldn't be a problem. I've never had a problem with white chalk, but they also make gray chalks like this. And I have had problems with these, even though they are made for quilting. This one is called Quilter's Choice. I've had quilts where that does not wash out. So just be careful. The other thing too, speaking of marking pens, I've heard people say they use Crayola washable markers also, and that they've never had a problem. But I've also seen people then that write in as a comment that not every color of those markers washes out completely. And I can't tell you which colors that they've had problems with. I don't know. But again, be very careful with what you're using. And as they all suggest, do a test piece first. Just test it on a piece of fabric and see how well it stays, or how long it stays, and see if it washes out before you actually mark a whole quilt with it. And then these are called pouncers. This is a little pouch that's filled with chalk. And what you do is when you get, let me get a stencil here really quickly. So if you're putting your stencil on top of your fabric, you can use this to pounce on top, because once you pounce it, this fabric on here is porous enough to let some of the chalk through. So you pounce, 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 and then you just wipe it over top, and then this design gets transferred onto your fabric. So I used to use these quite a bit. It works great, and it always comes off. And that's actually part of the problem, is that it comes off so easily that a lot of times I found I was having to remark my areas over and over again. Because when I'm quilting one area, my hand is on the quilt, and I might actually be erasing a part that I've already marked. that's next to it. So, and the other drawback that I found about using these chalk pouncers is that when I pull my thread through, now it has to go through chalk also. And there's a lot of drag on that as you're pulling it through. So I think it's a lot harder on your thread. That's what I found anyway, is pulling it through the chalk all the time. Having said that though, the chalk works great for marking a quilt. And speaking of stencils here, I'll show you my stash, which is not really a lot. People have asked me what I use to mark my quilts, and this, I mean, it's not a lot really compared to how many quilts I make, but these days I'm concentrating more on getting stencils that give me a nice overall pattern. So here you'll find some cables. I have like several different cable designs, and my Baptist fan one is in here too. And then I have some in here for borders. And then I have some of the smaller ones here for individual blocks. So that's what the stencils look like. And I will give you the supply or the web address of where I get these. Most of the times, honestly, I get these at quilt shows. And so this has just been just a collection over 30 some years. I just pick up a couple here and there. I hope that helped to answer some questions. And if you've never hand quilted before, I encourage you to do that, because really one of the things I found about hand quilting for myself is the more that my hands are actually involved in the making, the better and the more rewarding it is for me at the end. I just feel more emotionally connected to it the more my hands are involved in it. So you really don't have much to lose. There really isn't a big investment in hand quilting. Basically, you can start with a small frame and some needle and thread and a thimble. It's not a big expense to jump in. So, and don't be too hard on yourself if you've never done it before. It is a learning experience. The more you do, the better you'll get. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll catch you next time. Bye.